Hello everyone, welcome to My Accent Tag. This is a big conversation about how we sound and how we feel that the way that we sound, our accents, are perceived by others, and how we perceive the way other people talk. There's a lot to unpack, and I'm excited about these 10 questions to open up the conversation and just get us looking at our inherent biases and the decisions that we make to see if we can open those up so that we're not making those quick decisions when we don't actually know about somebody's background, but where we can honor the differences inherent in each other and the things that make us uniquely the same, and honor the fact that these are choices of how we choose to express ourselves. So here we go. Starting with number 1, my name and where I grew up. My name is Amy Frances Walker, and I grew up mostly on Whidbey Island, which is a beautiful island in Washington State in the United States. Do I think I have an accent? Yes, I believe that everyone has an accent, that word just describes sort of the shapes of how I talk that can be categorized in a similar way to other people with similar background to me. Number 3, if so, how do you categorize it? So I would categorize my accent as a general American accent. And there's a really big concept there, and so I've just done a whole video about that term, general and standard, and what that even means. I don't believe there is one standard or one general that is representative of all of this country and everyone in it, but I have what is normally referred to as sort of a general. If I was going to be more specific and dial that down, it's on the bedrock of coming from Washington State, but I've also cultivated some things in it. So I used to say bag, and I say bag now because I think that's more the thing. I used to articulate more because I was in theater growing up, and I learned to kind of relax that a little bit. I do still like to say mountain when most people say mountain. So I'm someone who has paid an inordinate amount of attention to how I talk, and so all of that is kind of mushed together in my general American accent. Number 4, do you ever change your accent or word choice depending on whom you talk to? If so, share. Yeah, absolutely. When I'm talking to my brother, I'll say, dude, bro, that is sick. And I'll mean it, like it will just come out. Dude, bro, that is sick. Or I'm talking to my grandparents, I'll say, oh my goodness. Or probably more likely, oh my goodness, I'll make it a little bit more clear to understand. If I'm speaking with my Australian friends, I'll sound like this, like I sounded when I lived in Australia. When no one's looking, I'm quite often some form of British. But I might not. I might really change it depending on how I feel. So, yeah. But I think the question was depending on who I'm talking to. So, yeah, that's the long version. Yes, I do. Number 5, do you like your voice in general? And then there's kind of 2 parts to that. Name one thing you like about it. So, I do like my voice in general. I didn't used to. I've spent a lot of time cultivating a sound that I feel is really flexible when I want to go up, and but that also what I call a full spectrum voice. So I used to have a lot more tension in the back of my tongue, and I think my voice, I don't honestly remember what it sounded like, but I think it was a little smaller, and I remember it being more breathy. I didn't know that it was breathy, but when I first started doing voiceover and acting, I would get that note that my voice sounded breathy or like I was backing off. So I paid attention to making sure that I'm resonating with a more relaxed anatomy that is supporting me from my core so that I can open up into more of those resonances. Name one thing I like about it. I like that it's flexible, that I allow myself to sound so many different ways and still feel like me. Something I've worked hard to do. Number 6, have you ever felt judged for your accent or voice? If so, share your experience. Yes. Most often I've felt what I would call indirectly judged. I feel like women in general get judged for having kind of like a higher or thinner or sort of sometimes breathy voice, or maybe a sibilant S, or people will say shrill. I didn't get that note particularly, but or having uptick. Women are not the only ones who have uptick, and they don't all, but I've certainly heard a lot of judgment about women's voices in general, and I think I've more preemptively cultivated a lower tone and a fuller tone in response to that. Personally, I don't think I've felt intentionally like bullied for my voice, but I'm also somebody who has paid a lot of attention to it as a child, so I've been cultivating that from the get-go. So I kind of headed that off. Okay, number 7. Have you ever tried to change your accent or voice? Obviously, yes, I have. Also, to relax the soft palate so it doesn't get nasal, because that's one of the things that I tend to not enjoy as much as a fuller sound. Yeah, so what was that again? Have you ever tried to change your accent or voice? Yeah, totally. I'm constantly aware of how I sound. And as an actress, I'm changing it from person to person, from character to character, species to species. But even as me, so here's a good story. When I moved to Australia, I lived just south of Sydney in Wollongong. I went to Wollongong Uni, and for the first day, I was going in and out of the accent a bit, just sort of trying it on, because it's easier for me to sound like what I'm listening to. For the second day, I was able to go into it a bit more, but I would hear things like, oh, where are you from? Or something like that. And I go, okay, that's off. I was just so paying attention. By the third day, I didn't have people asking where I was from anymore. And that, to me, if I just don't sound like I have an accent, that means that I've done my job. I'm blending in. So I would still get, because it took me a while to learn all the jargon, there would be some times when maybe I would say drinking fountain when it's really a bubbler. So, I would try and pay as much attention as possible, but if I'd not heard that word yet, I might get it wrong. So, so I know, so I guess I'll retract my previous answer to, there was a thing about have I ever felt judged? Yeah, when I was living in Australia, if people found out that I was American, if they were like, oh, did you grow up in Sydney or Melbourne? And I'd say, oh, no, Seattle. And they'd say, oh, but you don't have an accent. Then I could see that lens start to focus really intently on how I sounded, and like there'd be a bit of a squint and sort of like, oh, that's why you ask questions in class, or that's why this or that. And so I felt like people weren't seeing me for me, but they were seeing me through the filter of Americanism. So that happened more in Australia, I think, just because I was than in New Zealand, where I also lived after. And that's really because hardly anyone knew I was American in New Zealand. I just skipped that part. Yeah. So, number 8, have you ever made assumptions about someone based on their accent or voice? I wish I could say I never had, but I have, which is why I've started this, because I want to look at what assumptions am I making about people, and how can I pause myself when I'm noticing differences and decide actively not to choose that I know what that means, because I don't know what that means. It might not mean they're any less educated. So for me, there are certain things, if the grammar is off to me, or if, people are saying thinking instead of ing, or, if there are just certain things, I'll notice those. Or even more than in real life, as an actor, I've worked very, very, very hard to be able to watch a movie, and if someone's accent is off, to not have that ruin the experience for me, and not have that mean that they didn't do a good job as an actor. I'm now able to not have that ruin it. In the beginning, it annoyed the heck out of me. And now I can go, oh, wow, I actively look for what I love about their performance to counteract that part of me that was just really highly developed. So it's a work in progress, and that's why I'm doing this. Number 9, what would you like people to know about you that they might not be able to tell from your accent or voice? That I love every accent and every way of talking, even if, as I previously said, I've had judgment about certain ways of talking. If you watch my other videos, that's why I will create a character that has maybe those characteristics in it, because there are things that I love about it. So if you look at me or hear me and think that I have a judgment about it, I would like you to know that I highly value all ways of being, and I'm really excited for this opening and flowering into hopefully a deeper equality, a deeper experience of equality in humanity. Okay, that's what came off the top of my head today. Number 10, the last question. Do you feel it's important to help change the stigmas and assumptions associated with certain accents while honoring their uniqueness? If so, what can you do to help? I do. This is what I'm doing. What I'm doing to help is opening the conversation, is listening to others. I've reached out to people to hear what accents mean to them and why they talk the way they talk, and that's why I'm doing this, to open the conversation even beyond what I'm able to respond to. I hope this can go out and that this can help you think more about how you sound and why you sound the way you sound and how other people sound, and finding new things to love about everybody. That and continuing to cultivate this process of exploration into what are the layers underneath the ways that we behave and the ways that we receive others and the ways that we express ourselves. So here we go. If you feel called to share this, I nominate you to share about your accent in your My Accent tag video. We are connected.